What's up guys, welcome back with another video, and in today's video I'll be going over the top things in the Bible that you probably missed. Chances are you know some of these things, but I bet that you didn't know all of them. Starting off with number 1, we have the Israelites in the desert. You may or may not know how their clothes didn't get worn out in the desert and their feet didn't blister, which is mentioned in Deuteronomy 8:4. And the text says, "Your clothing did not wear out on you, nor did your foot swell these 40 years." But you probably never put much thought into it. I have a theory that could or could not be true that takes this to a whole nother level, where not just the Israelites' clothes didn't wear out and their feet didn't blister, but what if as the children grew up, their clothes grew to fit them? Not just that, but if God didn't just keep their feet from getting blisters, but He also kept them from getting too tired, sore, and He even could have kept them from injuries when they did things like tripping. Now this is just a theory, of course, but it may or may not be true, and it's still crazy to think about, and I would not be surprised if it was true. Now this brings us to number 2. You may or may not have heard about the story of the 3 wise men. You probably have, and their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, which is mentioned in Matthew 2:7-11. Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and determined from them the exact time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child, and when you have found him, report to me, so that I too may come and worship him." After hearing the king, they made on their way, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went on ahead of them until it came to a stop over the place where the child was to be found. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And after they came into the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they fell down and worshipped him. And they opened their treasures and presented to him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But what if I were to tell you that there were not 3 wise men? Now it's possible, but we don't actually know for sure. Nowhere in the Bible does it say there were actually 3 wise men. We only assume this because there were 3 gifts. There very well could have been 3 wise men, but for as long as we live on this earth, we will never know for sure. Number 3. Most of you may know that the Passover lamb, and it needing to be sacrificed as a sign to show who wanted to follow God. But what if I were to tell you that it didn't have to be a lamb? We often think of it as a lamb because that is what is most talked about in Exodus 12:5. And I'll be reading all of Exodus 12:1-5, just for some more context. And it starts out by saying, "Now the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, This month shall be the beginning of the months for you. It is to be the first month of the year for you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, On the 10th of this month they are each one to take a lamb for themselves according to the father's household, a lamb for each household. Now if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his neighbors nearest to his house are to take one according to the number of persons in them. In proportion to what each one should eat, you are to divide the lamb. Your lamb shall be an unblemished male, a year old. You may take from the sheep or from the goats." Tells us that it can either be a 1-year-old lamb or goat. This means that the Passover lamb could have been a Passover goat instead. Numbers 4. More people have heard about the story of Jonah in the whale. This title is technically not correct because nowhere in the Bible does it say it was a whale. Jonah 1:17, Jonah 2:1, and Jonah 2:10, who mention the fish, all say that it was a great fish. Jonah 1:17 says, "And the Lord designated a great fish." Jonah 2:1 also says, "Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the stomach of the fish." And then verse 10 also says, "Then the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah up onto dry land." Not a whale. People say it's a whale because it's the biggest creature they know of and it makes more sense. But although it could have been a whale, chances are it was not, because there are many big fish that could more easily swallow a man than a whale. This means that the story of Jonah and the whale was likely not a whale at all, but instead Jonah and the fish. Number 5. In the beginning, when Adam and Eve brought the fall to man, can you guess what fruit they ate? Someone with biblical knowledge would usually say it was an apple, but the Bible does not say it was. Genesis 3:6 says that Eve gave Adam the fruit and he ate it. We assume it was an apple because it seems logical, but the Bible does not actually ever specify what kind of fruit it was. This is another thing that we will never truly know for as long as we're on this earth, but we can always ask God when we make it to heaven. Number 6. There are known to be many missing Bible verses throughout the Bible. Some examples of these would be John 5:4 or Acts 8:37. Some of you may know about them, but others may not. Even if you did know about these verses, have you ever wondered where they came from or why they're missing? They are verses that were thought to have been added in a couple centuries ago, such as the 15 or 1600s. These verses were added because people thought it made more sense and would make the Bible make more sense. But some versions, like KJV, still have them in the Bible. But other versions, like NIV, took them out, knowing that they might not be real verses. And although the Bible was originally perfect and doesn't have contradictions, that doesn't mean that the interpretations are perfect. Throughout the interpretations, there's still small flaws like these things, which means it's not perfect anymore because we don't have the original manuscript, which was the only perfect manuscript. Number 7. Many people wonder how the earth became so bad that God had to send a flood to destroy everything except for Noah and his family. But this is actually stated very obviously in Genesis 6:1-4. Now it came about, when mankind began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of mankind were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not remain with man forever, because he is also flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of mankind, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. It says that the children of God, which were known as the angels, came down to earth and had children with the daughters, which were the people. These angels, of course, became fallen angels, or in other words, demons, and this resulted in the children from the daughters being half demon and half man. These demon-like men were called Nephilim, and the earth being covered by demons was likely why it became so evil, because it was very demonic and not even fully man. They were known to be superhuman giants who were super strong but did very evil things, like even going to the extent of sacrificing their children. If the earth seems evil now, imagine how bad it must have been back in Genesis. It'd be hard to live your average day. I'd not have wanted to be alive in that time period, but thankfully we aren't, and even if we were, we'd have God on our side, and so we wouldn't have to worry about anything because He would protect us, and even if we died, we'd go to heaven to see Him. Number 8. The story of Jonah seems to end on a good note, right? Well, not exactly. A lot of people like me have probably read Jonah and missed what happens at the end of chapter 4. Or what doesn't happen. Once Jonah finally agrees to go and preach to the city of Nineveh, he says an 8-word speech which clearly states, 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. He still does not want the Ninevites to be saved, because he doesn't think that they actually deserve salvation, even though he doesn't either. But of course they became saved like God promised, In Jonah 4, verses 5 through 11, it says, "Then Jonah left the city and sat down east of it. There he made a shelter for himself and sat under it in the shade until he could see what would happen in the city. So the Lord God designated a plant, and it grew over Jonah to be a shade over his head, to relieve him of his discomfort in Jonah. And Jonah was overjoyed about this plant. But God designated a worm when dawn came the next day, and it attacked the plant and withered it. And when the sun came up, God designated a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down on Jonah's head, so that he became faint, and he begged with all his soul to die, saying, 'Death is better to me than life.' But God said to Jonah, 'Do you have a good reason to be angry about the plant?' And he said, 'I have a good reason to be angry, even to the point of death.' Then the Lord said, 'You had compassion on the plant, for which you did not work, and which you did not cause to grow, which came up overnight and perished overnight. Should I not also have compassion on Nineveh, the great city, in which there are over 120,000 people, who you did not know the difference between their right hand and their left hands, as well as many animals?' And Jonah 4 says that God gives Jonah a shaded tree for him to rest in the sun. But then when God withers the tree away, Jonah gets upset, even though God didn't have to give him the tree in the first place. Jonah was also still upset about Ninevites becoming saved, and this is how the book of Jonah ends. So we'll never know on this earth if Jonah ended up asking God for forgiveness and being happy for the Ninevites, or if he died wishing that they were never saved and that he never had to preach to them. Number 9. A lot of us know Peter as making a lot of mistakes. He is often used as an example of what not to do. Passages such as Matthew 13:28 through 31, Matthew 16:17 through 20, and Matthew 4:19 through 20 all mention how Peter left everything and went to follow Jesus. Disclaimer: Matthew 13:28 through 31 I'm realizing isn't as relevant. But Matthew 16:17 through 20 says, "And Jesus said to him, 'Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven.'" Then he gave the disciples strict orders that they were to tell no one that he was the Christ. Matthew 4:16 through 17 says, "The people who were sitting in darkness saw a great light, and those who were sitting in the land in shadow of death, upon them a light dawned. From that time Jesus began to preach and said, 'Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near.'" Now also read the next couple verses, which says, "Now as Jesus was walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and his brother Andrew, casting net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, 'Follow me, and I will make you fishers of people.' Immediately they left their nets and followed him," which ends in verse 20. We criticize him for things like denying Jesus, because he didn't want himself to look bad, or walking on water but then starting to sink because he got scared and was starting to lose his faith. But most of us would have trouble, or at least have to think about, if we wanted to completely drop our entire lives to go follow a man, or if we were being peer pressured into denying someone or doing something, or if we were out in a boat in the water and God told us he would protect us, but then send a great storm that could sink our boat. We often do not realize that we would probably make many, if not all, of the same mistakes that Peter made, and we might have in our lives. He seems like a bad example because the Bible does not state the many sins that the other apostles made. It states some, but not as many as Peter. The apostles could have been not much better than Peter, but the Bible just didn't state all the things they did. Also, Peter may have made many mistakes, but most, if not all, of the Bible have done way worse things in our lives than Peter. Number 10. Have you ever wondered where the idea of the dragon came from? Well, this is just a theory, but there's a small chance it could have came from the Bible. We all know the dragon as a mythical creature, and it's a huge beast that was incredibly strong and breathed fire. These were the same characteristics of the Leviathan talked about in Job 41:18-21, which says, "His sneezes flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eye of dawn. From his mouth go burning torches, sparks of fire leap forth. From his nostrils smoke goes out, as from a boiling pot of burning reeds. His breath sets coal aglow, and a flame goes forth from his mouth." And verse 22 also says, "In his neck dwells strength, and dismay leaps before him." Now the Leviathan is obviously not exactly the same as a dragon, because it was a water creature while the dragon has wings and can fly, but it still has the same idea of being a super big and strong fire-breathing creature. The dragon could have been taken as an idea from the Leviathan, but instead of a sea creature, they gave it wings and made it an air creature. Now we actually have a bonus one for number 11, because while I was finishing up, I found another great point I wanted to talk about. Number 11. Have you ever wondered where the Greek gods came from? Well, this is also a theory that may or may not be true, but it's very possible that they were partly real. Now you're probably thinking, how could they be real biblically? Well, since the angels came down and had children with the people and talked about in Genesis 6:1-4, which I'll read again, says, "Now it came about when mankind began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of mankind were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not remain with man forever, because he is also flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. And when the sons of God came into the daughters of mankind, and they bore children to them, those were the mighty men who were of old men of renown." These angels had the power to convince men that they were gods. This is a very interesting theory, but they had a lot of power through God, and even once they turned into demons, they could have tried to rule over the Nephilim, acting as their gods. If you saw a powerful being and you had a heart full of evil, not knowing God, and this being was also full of evil, you might think it is your God and follow it. Of course, God never lets this kind of stuff last, if it ever did or does happen, but there is a possibility that this occurrence happened. That's gonna wrap up this video, so if you enjoyed, then make sure to like and subscribe to see more content like this. And if you guys have any questions or any topics or ideas that you'd like me to cover, then please comment down below. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.